Hey everyone, thank you for joining today. So today really it's about how do I get my data into Fabric? That's what we're going to be covering. That's what we're going to be looking at. We're going to look about three, possibly if we have time, four different ways of starting to bring data into Microsoft Fabric. This here is me, practice lead for data and analytics. And just to give you because this is the first ProServeIT Academy session. We're going to be doing a session every month or so for the next couple of months. Right now, we're on bringing your data into Fabric, but the idea here is that each session is going to build on top of the prior one with the end goal of being able to both build a machine learning model, train it, and present it for predictions in Microsoft Fabric and visualizing results of those predictions. Today, we're bringing data in, and this is going to be the same data that we're going to continue using. My idea for this term of ProServeIT Academy is really, let's build a customer churn machine learning model. And yeah, to start with, we'll be bringing customer churn data into Fabric. Any questions before I dive further into this? Because this is session one, we're going to start with a quick, what is Microsoft Fabric? Why are we using it? What's it about? Why not use something else? That kind of stuff. Then we're going to go through 4 different ways of bringing data into Microsoft Fabric. Method number 1, just manually uploading files. Method number 2 is using a data flow. This is low code, no code. If anyone's used Power BI desktop, it's very similar to the get data look and feel. Then we're going to be looking at a Fabric pipeline, which is essentially, if anyone's ever played with Azure Data Factory, it's going to look very similar to that and gives you a little more control over certain aspects and a little more types of activities than a data flow will allow. And then we'll get into the final version, which is a notebook. I'm going very basic and easy with this notebook, but trying to give you a feel for what's possible there, because at that point you're getting into pro code. So you're coding, and possibilities are endless at that point, especially given the number of Python modules available to retrieve data from pretty much anything. Any questions about the agenda before I keep strolling along? Cool. So what is Microsoft Fabric? So if anyone's looked at the Azure/Microsoft data stack over the last number of years, there's been a whole bunch of different tools that do a whole bunch of different stuff. You got Power BI for visualization reporting. You've got Data Factory for orchestrating data movement. You've got Synapse data engineering, which allowed you to do some of what Data Factory did and some additional data manipulation, data transformation, data serving, allowed you to do some data science there. And then you had some real-time intelligence functionality with things like Azure Event Hubs, Azure Stream Analytics. What Fabric is Microsoft saying, let's take all of those tools that you're currently configuring, setting up separately, securing separately, licensing separately. Let's bring those all into a unified environment where connections between the systems becomes very easy, as well as you have a single license requirement now, and you get access to all of these different services, and you're charged that licensing, but you can use specific pieces of the puzzle and you don't have to license all of it. Again, makes that analytics workflow a little easier because the connections between these systems are tighter now, given that they're all in one unified system now. And AI is layered into almost every aspect of Fabric. I'll hope, if we have time, I'll hope to show off a little bit of the AI capabilities of retrieving data, but we're going to see that those AI capabilities even more once we get into this area here, these 2 areas here, the machine learning model for sure, it's all AI, visualizing data there. We're going to use a bunch of AI in there as well. Cleaning and modeling data, we might, and I'm going to try to today if we have time. Cool. That is the very high level of what is Microsoft Fabric. And then this is diving into exactly what is inside of Microsoft Fabric. I've also highlighted the areas that we're going to be covering in today's session. So really around data factory, data engineering. We're going to be hitting notebooks, not machine learning today. We'll do that later. We're going to be hitting the data flows and data pipelines. There's also shortcuts and mirroring. If anyone's interested in that, I can discuss what those pieces are. I'm not going to be showing them off today, but we can definitely discuss those if we have time. Any questions so far? I know I just went through a bunch of information there. Cool. All right. That brings us to demo time. So assuming all is going to go well for me today, we are diving into Microsoft Fabric. So here's Microsoft Fabric. It looks a lot like Power BI Online for anyone that's used Power BI Online. I've already built out a bunch of stuff here already. We're going to ignore this stuff for now because I'm going to build it anew so you guys can see exactly how easy and smooth this is going to be, hopefully. But yeah, let's start in. So step one with most stuff when you're bringing data into Fabric is really, let's create a lakehouse. A lakehouse is going to, and we covered this in one of our ProServeIT Academy topics last year. A lakehouse is really the mixture of a data lake and a data warehouse. So you get the governance, manageability of a data warehouse with the scale and ability to have both structured and non-structured data of a data lake. And we'll even touch on that a little bit today. So I'm going to call this lakehouse Academy. And I'm just going to go create. And we are creating lakehouse. There. We now have a lakehouse. We have files. We can load anything into this files area we want. And we also have tables. You'll notice that both of these things are currently empty. And just to make sure we're clear, files are any kind of file you want. Tables are tabular data. So we can take a CSV file, for example, load it into files, and then convert that CSV into a table for use later on. And if we remember back to my slide deck, the first way we are going to do this is going manual. So we're going to manually load some data into Microsoft Fabric. And that is where I'm going to start. So I can just go click on these three dots beside files. I can upload. I want to upload a file. I want to, and this might not show up clearly for everyone. It's just popped up a window, like a file upload window for my desktop. I'm just picking a CSV file, hitting open, and you see that's the file name right there, customer churn. I just hit upload, and that file is now uploaded. It's a pretty small file, so it will happen all pretty quick. Even when it's in the file state, I can start to see what's in that file. You'll see this is a comma separated file for a telco with the customer ID, the gender, whether they're a senior citizen, whether they have partner, dependents, how long they've been with you, that company, a whole bunch of information there. Monthly charges, total charges. So we've got it in CSV now. And we can click here. We see it there. And now I want to bring that and I want to load it to a table. So I'm just going to load it to a table, denote that this one came through CSV. Nice and easy. It says, hey, is there a column header here? Yes, we have a column header. Is there a separator? Yes, it's comma separated. We could also do things like if you had a pipe separated, you can do pipe separate, other things like that you can do. So we are going to load that. And now what this is doing is it's taking it from this files location and it's going to land it into our tables location. So now we have a table with that customer churn data in it. And when we click on that, it has taken that data and pulled it in. You can even see that in certain areas, it's picked up that this is a decimal. This total charges here, it's still picked it up as a string. I believe that's because there's some bad data in here we need to clean up, and that'll come in our next session when we go through cleaning and transforming and modeling data. But just to call out that it does try and identify what types of columns you're dealing with here. So it's picked up that this is an integer, zeros or ones. Picked up that this is an integer. So that is method one. And I'm just going to jump back to my slide deck for 1 sec. If I jump back to here, our agenda, we've covered off what is Fabric. We've covered off manual uploaded. And we might go through this one more time later on with an image file. We'll see if we have time or not. But just to point out, that was the manual upload section of this. Are there any questions on this before I keep driving forward? If I jump back to here, we've got, this is the one I built before. We've got our Academy Lakehouse. I click into our Academy Lakehouse. This is what we've got here. Now, let's say, and I also want to point out, actually, I'll just start going through it. Let's say we don't want to manually upload these files. We want to retrieve these files from a SQL database, because then instead of having to manually upload these things, we can set up the refresh that we want and we can schedule it every day or every hour. We can then go back and retrieve the data from that SQL table. And that's where we're going to go next. And we're going in order of kind of least complicated to most complicated. So next is data flow. We're going to create a data flow. Data flow, again, if anyone's used Power BI Desktop before, this is going to look very similar to Power BI Desktop. Sorry, this is going to look very similar to Power BI Desktop's get data functionality or Power Query functionality. So we can say, hey, I want to get data. And I'll just point out, if we go to here, there are tons of different places from which you can get data. You want to get Exchange, you want to get SharePoint data, you want to get your Google Analytics data. What else do we got here? You want to get, you have data sitting in D365 Business Central. You can get that. I won't go through all of them, but there are quite a few ways to get data, and this is constantly being updated. Every month there's new data connectors coming out. Today we're going to go nice and easy. We're going to go SQL Server database. I've set up a database ahead of time. Net. I already put my credentials in to connect. It's using Azure Active Directory credentials, which is nice. So you don't have to open it up to SQL credentials if you're using data flows. I can then go next, and I can look into my database. And what I've loaded in the database so far is, again, it's that same customer churn table that's sitting in my database. So I can select that. You can imagine if there's 30 tables here, you can select all of your tables. I can then hit create, and it's going to start creating my data flow for me. And again, this is all going to look very similar to what, if you've played with Power BI Desktop at all. We can now, and we'll get more into how do we transform data, how do we clean data and things in our next session. Today is really focused on how do we start to get data in here. But you can see there's a bunch of things. If we had two queries, we can merge them or append them together. If we needed to clean something, if we needed to change a data type, right now this is a string, we could say, hey, you know what? I want this to be integer. I can also do things, and I'll just do this quickly. I can click there, select all of my columns, and I believe here, I can just say, hey, go ahead and detect my data type for me. What you'll notice is every time I do something here, it's adding a new step. And then every time I refresh this data flow, it's going to rerun through all of those steps for me. So this is a nice advantage over Excel, where in Excel, You build your formula, you're doing some cleanup steps, you go and filter a column. You got to remember all those steps you're doing in Power BI or in Fabric data flows. It's remembering all the steps you took along the way to get to the data set that you want to analyze. Now, down here, we're going to see if this is going to work for us today. Let's see. Sometimes this takes a few minutes after you create a lakehouse for it to actually read it. And we got lucky today. It's working properly. We're going to go down to our PSIT Academy, and we're going to select our Academy Lakehouse. This here is our Academy Lakehouse. We're going to name this table. We're going to call it Customer Churn SQL, knowing that we got it from a SQL database. So this is one thing that Power BI Desktop's get data functionality doesn't have, is this location, because it's always just going into Power BI Desktop. In here, we get to choose where the data goes to. There's also some, and I'll just touch on this briefly. There are also some, and I'll have to go through that process one more time. But once we see, there are also some additional settings here. So we can say, hey, when we're updating, when we run this again, do we want to append data? Do we want to replace data? Do we want to set that there's a specific schema, there's a specific set of columns that are always going to be there? Or do we want the columns in our target to change as the source table changes? This can be very helpful for a SQL database that is still under development. You might not know exactly which columns are coming through. So having this dynamic schema can help. And sometimes you just say, hey, if I add these additional columns, maybe I'm going to end up breaking a report. So I just want to fix my schema right away and have it nice and steady. So we'll just leave that like that for now. I'm just going to say we are good. We're going to go publish that. And you'll see now we've got dataflow 2, which is the one we just created. And we can rename this too. It doesn't have to be called dataflow 2. And with these little dots here, this is saying that it's currently publishing. Once it's done publishing, these refresh buttons are going to open up, and we're going to be able to refresh this data, and then we'll start to see it show up in our Academy Lakehouse. If we wait a minute or two, there. So that's done, and it's already attempting to refresh itself. It shouldn't take too long because I didn't use a big table. Other things we can look at here, and I'll just dive into this quick. With a manual data load, anytime you want to update your data again, you got to go back and do that manual upload. You need a human in the loop to do that. With a dataflow Gen 2, you can set your refresh schedule. You can set whatever time zone you want. You can turn that on. You can say, hey, I want you to go weekly on these days at this time. And if anything bad happens, I want you to email this guy and these people here to here. And while that is refreshing, we can jump into, actually, before I jump into our Fabric pipeline, any questions on data flows? That finished. We jump back to Academy. We refresh tables. And currently saying unidentified. If we wait another minute or two, it's going to come up. It just takes the minute for it to detect what it's been pulled in. Then we can load that. And we've got our customer churn data again, just using a different method to get it in. And like I said, as that customer churn table, as we add more rows to that customer churn table in SQL, we can then refresh that pipeline and it'll replace all the rows with all the new rows that are existing in that table. There are also, I'll just point to it now, I'm not going to go through it, but there are ways to build out data flows such that they run in an incremental fashion. So you're not getting the entire data. If there's a column that's last update date, last update time, or an index field that is always incrementing, you can use things like that to do an incremental load and just append rows instead of replacing everything every time. Cool. So that's method 1 and method 2. Any questions so far?
Yeah, no questions so far. I can go.
Cool. Okay. Sounds good. So method 3, we're going to dive into pipelines. Again, I went new item, pipeline here. That's one way of doing it. You could also go into the actual lakehouse itself and create a new pipeline here. I'm going to call this one Academy. Let's call it Academy Pipeline. Again, we can name it whatever we want, really. Okay. And it pops up this little thing here. And this is going to walk me through building out my pipeline. So what's the data source? Connect to that data source. What's the destination? Connect to that destination, review and save, and build me my pipeline, right? So again, just to make things nice and easy, we're going to go to our same database. So our PSIT academy.database.windows.net. One note of interest on these here, when you're dealing with pipelines, do not support Azure AD authentication. So you do have to go, if you've got a SQL database, you've got to go to, at least for the this copy activity we're creating, you've got to use your SQL authentication for that. So just a quick call out there. We're going to hit next. And it is just loading our database for us. And we can see our PSIT Academy database there. Hit next. It allows us to either pick tables. So we can pick a bunch of tables if we want. We could also write a SQL query if we want. We get to pick which way we handle this. So I'm just going to say, I just want that table, same table as before. I'm going to hit next. And now we get a bunch of options. So now where are we going to put this data? I want to put it into our Academy Lakehouse. So I want to put it into a table. I want to put it into a new table. And I'm going to call this one customer churn SQL pipeline, as opposed to the other SQL one. We can create our data mapping between our source here and our destination. We can even do things like changing that maybe internet service needs to go to outline security for some crazy reason. You can start doing things like that to change your mappings. You can even say, hey, there's certain fields that I just don't want them to come through. I don't want customer ID coming through. I'm going to delete it. So you can do things like that. Then go next. And it's giving us a summary. So here's your summary. You're going to be going, your source is your SQL Server. Your destination is the ProServeIT Academy. And we're going to start this data transfer right away when we've completed this. Sure. I'm just going to save that. It's running it now. Should be able to go over there and see our output. It's in progress now. In a couple seconds, this will be done. Okay, I succeeded there. And now we can jump back to our Academy Lakehouse and refresh our tables. And now we have our customer churn SQL pipeline table. Here we go. So now we've got all that data in there. Again, just using, again, a different method this time. If we go back to this Academy pipeline, one more thing I will point out is got a similar scheduling functionality. I can say, I want to run this. I can repeat every 15 minutes. I can repeat hourly, daily, weekly. I can repeat certain days of the week, all of that stuff to ensure that my data is as up to date as I need it. One of the things that's cool about these pipelines as opposed to data flow. So data flow is really about taking my data from here, I'm landing it to there. Pipelines allow you to do a whole bunch more stuff. So I can actually add different activities in place. So let's say when this copy data finishes successfully, I want to send a Teams message out. I can do that. I can click on my Teams. I can say, hey, when this is successful, go to this Teams. I can log into my Teams And I can say, I want to post to a channel, or I've got a little Academy demo there, and I've got my session 1 channel. And now I can start to put stuff in place to say to include what happened here. So I'm going to say my pipeline name completed successfully. I can also include some metrics about it if I really want to. So I can say how much data was read, how many files were read, that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to go data read, put a little data read. There we go. And in the subject of this message, I can do the same thing. I can add stuff in here, pipeline name. In here, you got to get a little bit programmy to get it done. So I'm going to concatenate my pipeline name with string that says completed successfully. Close that off. Okay. And now, sure, all that say, yeah, that looks good. Now, when I run this, sure, save and run. Go for it. That copy is in progress now. And that's done. And then the Teams messages took a second, and I'm going to reshare out other window, Teams window. I'm going to share out my Teams. And you see our Academy pipeline completed successfully. Academy pipeline completed successfully, data read. So that's the Teams message that just got sent through 1:35 p.m. just right now. So you can start to do things, you can start to orchestrate, is probably the right word for it. You can start to orchestrate your workflow or your data movement along with error messages or other things that you need to notify your team on. You can also do if conditions. So if this is successful, do this. If this is failed, do that. For eaches, so you can start to loop through these things. So if I needed to copy all possible tables, I can do things like that as well using looping. I can reach out to web APIs. I can send Outlook messages, a whole bunch of additional orchestration tasks I can do in this pipeline. Any questions about anything we've covered so far? And I'll just point out, these are the manual, probably the least used, the dataflow Gen 2 and the pipelines. They're the most widely used ways of bringing data into Microsoft Fabric. So now we're going to look at Notebook. So notebooks are where we get even more programming. We're going to create a notebook here. I'm going to make this really simpler than it usually is. There is this place called Hugging Face. They got 231,000 different data sets on a range of stuff, everything from Wikipedia stuff through to video stuff. There's tons and tons of information in here. And this is actually the place where I got my customer churn data set from. Now, the great thing about that place is all of these data sets and this website, they have a Python module, like a lot of different applications have. They have a Python module that allows me to retrieve data off of their website quickly and easily. That's what we're going to do right now. We're going to use that to do that. First of all, I'm just going to install their datasets module. This is the Hugging Face datasets module. While that's running, I'm just going to start filling out the rest of the code here. I've already got this code pre-prepared, but it's standard anyways. Once I install that module, then I'm saying, hey, from that module, I want to get your load dataset function. And I'm going to use that load dataset function to load your customer churn prediction dataset. So I'm going to go ahead and run that because this one's finished now. Installing that module is finished. And it's now downloading that CSV file for me, that same CSV file we've been using through this process. And now all I'm saying here is take this CSV file that you've provided me and turn it into what in the Python world is known as a data frame. And then show me what's in that data frame. Cool. I've got my data frame now. And I can actually start just using it as is from a notebook. So I can clean it. I can do all the possible transformations I can think of to this. And again, we'll dive into more of that in our next lesson, which is the actual transform and model section. But the other thing I'm just point to that we can do here is we can now take this data that we've pulled into Fabric and we can actually save it back to our lakehouse. That's if it wants to be friendly with throwing their request. Let's try it again. Oh, that's why. I forgot to add my lakehouse to this notebook. So I'm going to add an existing lakehouse, add my Academy lakehouse to this notebook. And this is where I'll have to run all these things again. But this is where the nice capabilities of Fabric all being in a single unified architecture really helps, because in the past, if I wanted to run my Python notebook on top of and save my data to a lakehouse after I did something in that notebook, I'm having to do all of this connectivity stuff to get my notebook attached to that lakehouse in order to save things. So I've got access keys, I've got all of this stuff that now I have to secure and worry about. With Fabric, I just click and say, yeah, attach that lakehouse for me. And all of the authentication and control and security aspects of it are taken care of by Fabric for me, which is really nice compared to what we had to go through in the past to get us to this point of being able to save some output into a lakehouse table or into a file. This should go pretty quick at this point. And while we're waiting for this to go, any questions? This is downloading our files for us, saving it into this churn variable. And we're just pulling out churn data. There it is there. And then we're going to do this one more time. This time it should work. There we go. And now if we refresh our tables here, we are going to see that now we have our customer churn notebook, which is what we named this. And again, being able to just say, yeah, put it in tables under customer churn notebook. It's so much easier than what we used to have to do when we had to wire all these systems together manually. And just to show, so now we've got our Academy Lakehouse and refresh that. There's our notebook table. One more thing I'll point to that you get out of the box, because I know we only have about a minute left. You also get the SQL Analytics endpoint, assuming it's going to work for me. One of the cool things that we can do here is we can start, after we bring all this data in, we can start writing SQL queries against our data that's in our tables. You can start to do SQL analysis on your data right away. You can start creating saved queries. You can start creating views on this data. You can start doing a whole bunch of stuff. And this is just, again, this took me like 10 seconds to set up a system that I can start doing this stuff with. And now I'm going between tables there. So I'm joining that table to that table. Not that there'd be any reason to do that, but I'm just pointing out the abilities that you have there. Cool. I will leave it there for now. I will reshare out my PowerPoint. So we went through manual upload, we went through Dataflow Gen 2, we went through the Fabric pipelines, we went through a notebook using Python into, and this is our Fabric discovery, helps review Microsoft Fabric and your data infrastructure or what you've got, or any reports you have, things like that, to see what it would look like to get you working with Fabric. Yeah, that's all I've got for today. Thank you.